Welcome to the Adoptee Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Melissa Guida-Richards, an author, adoptee, and mom. Each week, we will delve into the nuances of adoption, as well as tips for how to bring up difficult discussions in your adoptive family. And most importantly, we will not shy away from tough topics. So thanks for joining me today, and let's jump into your weekly dose of Adoptee Thoughts.
Okay. Can can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your adoption story?
Okay, good. All right. So I am Leigh Ann Baglin. I'm also a Korean American adoptee. I came to the United States when I was about 6 months old, to a Caucasian family, in New Jersey. So I grew up in New Jersey. I still live in New Jersey, East Coast native for forever. And I guess in
Mhm.
comparison to Katie and Scott is like I kind of grew up um, around adoptees a little bit more. So I had a little bit more like knowledge and access to community and stuff like that. So I've been involved with
Mhm.
adoption since I started going to a camp when I was young and then kind of worked through as a teenager and then went into social work as I got older. So it's been like in my in my environment for a while.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, just like, also I have a brother who is also adopted. We are not biologically related though. He's 3 years younger than me. Yes, so he's Korean American also. We were both adopted through Holt.
Yeah.
Um, and we were very opposite in like the interest that we had. So I was very interested in everything and he was just like, "Nope, I don't want to know about any of it. It doesn't matter to me." So we're both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. We can who's the middle? Who's the middle?
That would be
Okay,
me.
Scott.
My name's yeah, my name's Scott McCreary. I'm also a Korean American adoptee. I was adopted around 6 months old through Dillon International, which is based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. To also a Caucasian family. They also
Think
had,
I mean, Katie and
they
Scott
already
should
had
probably start this
two
off because they connected before I
daughters
even came into the picture
biologically
with
before
them.
they adopted
Okay.
me. They basically, I think at that point, were a little bit older and wanted a boy. So rather than try again, they adopted. Um, I was actually as well named for my mother's favorite dog, a Scottish Terrier. So that's where that came from. Yeah, I haven't done much about as far as adoption searching things like that until recently when I found out about other siblings here. This is still a pretty new part of my journey as far as things with adoption go.
Hi everyone, this is Melissa. I am just inserting Katie's bio right here because we had some technical difficulties doing an interview with multiple people. The rest will be normal recording, but this is just a little bit about Katie. Katie Ares is a 40-year-old Korean adoptee born in Gyeongsan, South Korea. Katie was adopted at the age of 3 months old. Raised as an only child, she lived in Pennsylvania before her family moved to Central Florida, which she considers her hometown. Most of Katie's career has been spent in roles within the nonprofit sector. Katie now calls Arizona home, where she spends her free time exploring the outdoors with her husband and two dogs. Katie is grateful to have connected with Leigh and Scott and is enjoying the important role of being an uni and nuna.
Well, I always am very appreciative of people coming on and sharing their stories, and especially you guys because you found each other. Can you tell us how that happened and how long ago was
Uh,
it?
okay. So I figured we were going oldest to youngest again, but either way. So I did. So my
Okay.
wife is big into her family genealogy and everything. So she decided she wanted to do DNA testing to find out more things. We initially did the ancestry one. When it came back, like I just did it to be like, hey, I don't know anything about my DNA makeup. Maybe there's something interesting there. Uh, so I did it, and it
Hmm.
came back and it said I was 100% East Asian. And I was like, well, that doesn't tell me anything. So we looked into it, and we're like, found out that, or we'd heard that 23andMe was a bit more specific with the Asian countries. So we did that one to try it out. Um, and it's probably a year went by until I got notified. Like Katie sent me a message because she, I think, hadn't logged on in a long time because she had done it previous to me and didn't find anything. And then I believe she logged on like a year after I did it, and that's how we connected through that.
Wow, that is so cool. I was able to reconnect with the sibling through 23andMe too. So this is like super special, and I'm excited to hear more. Uh, Katie, so you reached out first, right?
Ooh, yeah. So I received my gift, or received 23andMe as a gift, for the holidays from my employer at the time. And, I got it and it was cool. And, and I kind of similarly to what you've both shared is that, I had kind of just gone along and not really had any, I don't know, questions or, here, maybe a curiosity here and there, but I don't know, it wasn't one of those things that I had ever really looked into very much. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe this can tell me if I'm, predisposed to something, or if I have allergies that I might not be aware of, maybe I can, find something out through that. So I shelved it for a little while. I didn't take the test for a couple of months, and then I took it. Same thing as Scott, I got my results back, and at that time the data was not really thorough, or they hadn't had enough samples. And so I was then at that time I was 1/3 Korean, 1/3 Japanese, and 1/3 Chinese. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I was like, okay, cool. Then shelved it for a couple of years until I one day I just woke up on a Sunday and just thought, let me just make sure that my password works. And I wonder if anything else has come of this, probably because I started to see commercials. And then, when I opened it up, I saw a notification that just said, we found your brother, or we think we found your brother. His name is Scott McCreary. And I think the thing that we still talk about too is that it's interesting because somehow, in the year gap between Scott signing up for 23andMe and me, I guess enrolling or re-enrolling, is that somehow the notifications like weren't turned on during that time, but then when I re-logged in, then they were. And I can't remember consciously, checking that box of yes, I'll share my information. But thank goodness he wasn't just waiting for a year thinking, she doesn't want to connect. And so I did, like, the minute that I, saw that notification, I'm like, I don't know what to do, but do you want to talk? So
That is so exciting. How did you, Leigh Ann, how did you get into did you do 23andMe too?
yeah, so I also did 23andMe. It's kind of funny because I've told everybody, like, when the DNA testing kits came out, I was very like hardcore against them because I felt like at first they were very predatory, like marketing towards adoptees, and
Oh
it just
yeah.
didn't sit right with me. So, but I don't know why, one day randomly, like, I saw a really big sale on the kits, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to do it. With some kind of switch happened in my brain, and I was like, maybe there's some kind of health thing I could look out for, or find out anything. So I just randomly bought, just randomly bought the kit in the middle of COVID, basically.
Hmm.
I submitted my DNA sample, and got it back in 2020. Like, I remember we were in lockdown, my kids were playing in the backyard, and I got the results back, and it said you have two siblings. Now, I had previously done a birth search, and I had found out like limited information about our birth family. So
Hmm.
I knew that we have two Korean siblings in Korea. So I thought, oh, maybe this is them. This could be wild. But then I opened up the site to see, like, no, they're not in Korea. They are in America, and they're older than me. And it was wild. It's been a wild ride since then, but incredible. I think I sent a message to Scott,
Yeah.
right? Scott, you probably have better memory of how we
Yeah.
connected. He's got the best
No,
memory.
yeah. So I was actually at work and I just randomly logged back in. I just ever since I found out about Katie, I would just randomly log in just to check. I,
What
yeah,
if?
because since me and my wife did it together, like the notifications go to her email, so I never got them.
Mhm.
So I was just like get bored at work. I was like looking in, and I remember like I was just sitting there at work, like in a room full of people, and just like, oh, expletive, and everyone's like, look. I was like, what's wrong? I was like, I have another sister. And I was just like, I just couldn't believe it. So I was like, immediately, I was like, I had to stop. I went home for the day. I was like, I can't do anything here now. Because, it's just a whole, every emotion you can think of just rushes through your body all at the same time. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's overwhelming. It's scary. It's everything. And so yeah, it was just awesome. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's like one of those like big things in history is like, where were you when this happened? Mine was always like, what was I doing when I found out about my sisters? So
Yeah, yeah, I totally can relate because I remember getting that email and like in my car in the parking lot just waiting to go into an appointment. I was like, I remember the exact like day and the weather or whatever because
Oh,
it's super special. But I feel like a lot of people don't realize how overwhelming it can be too because like
mm,
we have all this excitement and obviously we're happy to find family, but it's also a little
mhm.
scary. Right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And you're not really sure, what are they like? Are they open to this? Is there some kind of circumstance that will go wrong? There's so many questions.
Yeah, yeah. Did you guys just email back and forth? Did you immediately hop on the phone? Like how did you approach your relationship with each other from then on?
Gosh, I feel like well, okay, I can take this. I think, for a while, because like of that nervousness that you mentioned, like with Scott, it was, I think I was so trying to be formal and I was like, oh, we're going to email, I don't want to, I want to be professional about this, this is like respect everything. And so I think, we started, I mean, even though I had already like, even I think before I got the first response, like I had already, my husband and I had already looked him up on Facebook. We're like, how many Korean Scott McCreary's can we find? And so I'm like, I think this is him. So before, like we had already done all that. And then, I'm like, hi, sending everything like really formal, right, Scott? We were super like, for a
yeah.
while, it was like emails and emails. And then I was like, oh, maybe, instant messages here too through 23andMe. And then I think eventually we ended up like going to social too. And then it just became more of like texting and, memes and understanding that like we were like, oh, this is great. Because, like, you get it, like you have this, feeling about this day or things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that.
Yeah. It was funny because me and Katie had not officially like had a phone conversation.
Right.
Like so we didn't really talk to each other that way until we actually met for the first time. Like
Mhm.
everything was back and forth through social media. Like I think every once in a while like there'd be like a Snapchat and you could hear each other's voice, but never actually live talking to each other on the phone.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like a big step.
Yeah.
Like I know for me and my sisters, we were emailing too. Like I don't know why we
Right.
have to be like this is such
Best
regular
practices.
correspondence.
Right.
Yeah, it was like hello.
Warm regards.
Like, thank you so
Right.
much for taking the time to speak with
Right.
me. Like, I was just curious,
Right.
what are your favorite hobbies? Like, it was just very formal. And then, like, I think it took a year and a half until we were like, you know what, maybe we should exchange phone numbers. And we were ready for that type of commitment. And meanwhile, we're siblings, we're related. Um, are you guys do you know if you're full siblings or half siblings?
Yeah, we're
Are you
100%
able
full siblings.
Wow.
That's the
That
yeah,
is
that's the wildest part, I think. um,
yeah, that's exciting. I'm just like nerding out here, geeking out.
well, what, like something that I think about often is, especially Melissa, like with you and your sisters, something that we have, that's worked out really kind of lucky for us is that we were all adopted to the United States, so we all speak the same language and we all have the same
Yes.
references for culture and the way, we can interact. So like while there's a lot of the deep-seated like grief and anger, like we could have had our whole lives together, all of these things, like we are very fortunate in that it's, just easier to communicate and we can do that without having to have all those barriers. And that's been really, really helpful for us, definitely.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think some people, when they hear like stories like this, they're like, wow, like you guys were all adopted into different families and this and that. Like it is unique, but it's not that uncommon that there's so many out there. Like we don't know how many other adoptive families are broken up like this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing to think that just because we all were like, huh, let's take a chance. Let's take a chance, let's do DNA, see what's going to happen. And then now here we are, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So.
Absolutely. It's just really, yeah, a decision, a random choice here or there that changes the trajectory of all of it.
Have you guys? I think Scott mentioned that he met up with Katie. Have you all met up in person yet?
Yes. So Scott, yeah, I mean, you guys.
That's fine. Yeah. So we have all officially been together once. Um, Yeah, but I've had, obviously, before we found out about Leigh, me and Katie have met up a few times, met up with Leigh since, and then um, me and Leigh flew out to Phoenix to see Katie. So that was the one time we've all been together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I think that was the hardest part too, is, like we found out about Leigh, like right as everything was like starting to lock
Mhm.
down. And so even when we were thinking like, oh, wow, we want to try to plan something, we were like, well, we don't know when this could be or if that's going to be possible for a long time. So they were wonderful enough to come out for a really quick, like 48-hour turnaround. That was awesome.
Best 48 hours.
That meeting your siblings in person is definitely like a really great experience. And for me, I know like at first I was really worried. I was like, oh no, is this gonna be so awkward? Like
Right.
like we're strangers, but we're not. We're siblings, but we're like this is a weird dynamic. But for me and my sisters, it kind of felt really natural, and I was really surprised and pleasantly surprised that it was so normal just to walk in a room and be like, okay, it's not weird to hug you. Like it feels like you are my sister. And I was worried that there was going to be like that awkward separation that we wouldn't be able to kind of mesh together.
Right. Yeah, I had
Mhm.
those same concerns for sure. It was like, how do you catch up on a whole lifetime with a person that you like are naturally connected to biologically, but you have never interacted with at all? But I mean, I think that we had all the same experience where it just felt really natural. We all just clicked together, and any of
Mhm.
that like concern of awkwardness just kind of flew out the window the minute we got together. It's been really amazing.
Mhm.
Since reconnecting, have you guys found more of an interest to get involved with like the adoptee community since then than before?
We can go oldest to youngest again. Well, I think it's been amazing because I will say from like I guess my point of view, I had kind of written a narrative for myself, and I felt like I was just this like one person, living in the world, and that was it, and that was all my expectation. And then to find Scott and Leigh, and also with Leigh's background and like all of her knowledge and being able to just I don't know, like appropriately too, like provide that support has just been amazing, because she's brought in some of these like, I'm like, oh, like, is this normal? Like, have we felt this way? And so I think too, like, having Scott and Lee to like bounce ideas off of, like, is it, is it okay? Like, have you gone through this? Do you feel these feelings, or am I being too sensitive? It's definitely opened my eyes, and, it's been I think a slower process for me, to try to like, so I'm like tipping my toes in the water. I wouldn't say I'm like jumping in with a cannonball, but I'm dabbling. But it's definitely started to pique my interest, and we've had um, some information, I guess, and sharing and stuff, and it's I don't know, it's a lot and it's overwhelming, but I think really, I guess,
Yeah.
fulfilling in a way. There's like a connection that I always say that I never knew that I missed
Mm.
until now I have it. I'm like, it adds like another level, I think, to
Yeah,
just feeling.
no, I completely
That's
agree with that.
wonderful.
So yeah, as far as obviously knowing I'm adopted, I didn't really, I don't know, say I'd have problems with it, but there are definitely things about adoption that I'd never really opened myself up to or realized, much until finding about Katie, and then especially even more so with Leigh, being that she has a background in it as well. She's helped introduce us to other adoptee groups like on your Facebook and stuff like that. That you realize, even though they're out there, you actually have a visualization of other people that have similarities through adoption that you do. And it's nice seeing those things, even though every single person's story is different with adoption. There's something we can all relate to, and it's nice knowing that you're not the only one feeling these certain things about this stuff that you feel like you can't talk to because nobody else understands it.
Right. Yeah, it's been really helpful just to have these two, like, we're constantly texting and just bouncing feelings and ideas and random thoughts off of each other. So it's been really great in that, like, the support is 100% there. Like, we could be texting at 3:30 in the morning and there's someone responding. Usually Scott, because he never sleeps.
Right. Scott is like on it.
Scott never sleeps, but it's been really great, you know. And then also, like, having a little bit of a background in adoption, I've been able to kind of pull in, especially now, you know, there's so many more resources, whether it's like
Yeah.
authors, webinars, Instagram, you know, like there are so many more voices of adoptees that are so, like, can help to kind of guide everybody through this as a collective. It's been really helpful. So I know, like, you specifically, I have recommended your book to countless people.
Thank
You
you.
know, there's so many great
Mhm.
resources that, like, can just help you understand that, like, you're not alone in these feelings and it's totally normal to have whatever kind of emotion that comes up, and how you know, how complicated it can be through the journey. So,
Yeah, yeah, and, like, the support network of, like, siblings and now, like, the community on social media, it's really amazing to see how different it is from, like, our generation growing up where, like, there wasn't as much. There was some, like, cultural camps and, like, picnics once in a while, but now it's just like the touch of our fingers. We can find out so much information, we can connect, and it's really beautiful to see.
right, absolutely. I mean, I would have loved to have some of
Yeah.
these resources growing up, you know. It's done wonders.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm so excited that people can hear like firsthand because when we think of reunion, at least when I do, I think of like news shows where like there's people running into a room and then hugging and crying and then that's all we see really, you know? So it's like what comes after? So what else? And it's nice to see that we can build these relationships, we can keep them strong, we can communicate. You guys are texting all the time. That's great to hear, you know? And it's just wonderful. Um, in this journey, I'd like to know if any of you have found any similarities that you were wondering, like, because my sisters, it was funny. We asked each other, like, "Oh, what's your favorite color?" All of us purple, as you can see.
Oh,
That's
All of
awesome.
us favorite color purple. Did you have any of those like light bulb moments?
Well, I'll just start with one thing. The one thing that we do notice is like when there's two of us that really like something and then one of us that doesn't, or vice versa. Like I tend to be in like the food different thing. I don't know. Like, so it's like when we find something that's different, then we tend to like, you know, I'm either like having a breakfast burrito or I'm putting tons of cilantro on my plate, you know, because I love cilantro and they don't. But like finding those little things, and it's funny because you get to like celebrate that. I don't know. So we've turned those into a lot of inside jokes, but
definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think well, Katie and I know we've discussed how we both had like deeper voices. So I mean, I can speak for myself when I say like I was always a little self-conscious of like my man voice when I talked. But and like Katie and I also individually before meeting both decided somehow that like we were only going to wear black clothes. So we literally like
right.
we only wear black clothes and that had nothing to do with one another. Which was funny.
Absolutely.
But our handwriting is very similar.
It is very similar. It's
Yeah.
strange,
Yeah, it's really
but
yeah,
cool.
very weird.
That
Mhm.
is super cool. And then it's funny because I can see that with like my husband and his dad and now my kids, they're starting to write. And I'm like, wow, that is so weird. How like little things like that. As an adoptee, I never would have guessed because my parents and I we don't have the same like handwriting.
Right.
But it's these little things that like make these connections extra special and why I think like connecting
Mhm.
with bio family is just like amazing.
Yeah, it really opens your eyes to a lot of stuff. Like before this process, I was very heavy believer into nurture over nature, you know? And then after this, I'm like,
Mm.
"Oh my gosh, I don't think that anymore at all." Because sometimes like Scott and I will look at ourselves in a picture and we could be twins, like our faces are
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
exactly the same.
Mhm.
It's really weird actually.
I know like people who are listening can't see, but I can see the similarities like between Leigh and Scott. I haven't really been able to see Katie because the camera hasn't been working.
Yeah, we definitely share those qualities too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whirlwind to be able to look at somebody though, you know, look at somebody and say like, "Oh my gosh, I share these things with this person," you know.
Yes.
Wild experience in your 30s.
And something random
Yeah,
too is I think we
exactly.
all have really like large calves, and we've, Leigh and I have complained about that as far as trying to fit ourselves in boots, but like now we're just like, oh, we own it. Like we're the family that has really solid calves. So,
Exactly.
I love it. So I'm just wondering, are you guys all married? Do you have children?
So I am married. I have a husband and 2
Okay.
biological children.
I am married, no children as of yet.
And I am married, no children. But I have 2 adult stepsons.
Oh, that's cool too.
Mhm.
I just like find it really cool to see the dynamics of families working out because I know one of my sisters, she has 2 kids and they're twins, and like my kids are already like, oh, my cousins, this and that. So it's just wonderful to see like the different families and how they grow and how beautiful it is because
Yeah.
you guys are coming from like different states, right? So and now you
Yep.
have all these connections
Right.
across the United States that we didn't expect to have.
Hmm.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's really funny. I tell Katie and Scott a lot of the time. Some like probably every 2 weeks, my kids will come to me and they'll be like, "Wait, mom, how many aunts and uncles do I have again?" Because then they count like Katie and Scott, and then Scott's sisters, and then like everybody that just keeps kind of going out. And then they're like Katie's husband and Katie's husband's siblings. Do they count too? Like it just gets bigger and
When
bigger.
you start putting
It's
up like
really
a
fun.
family tree just to keep track of all the
Yeah,
different.
exactly.
Aw.
um,
So
huh,
funny.
okay, thank you guys. Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't
Mm.
chatted
I
about
mean, I guess
yet?
the thing that I would like to just mention, because this story is like for us and our experience, it's been, the narrative is like overwhelmingly positive, right? Because we're getting these beautiful relationships and we're still like getting to know each other and it's really awesome. But I'm gonna get emotional talking about it, but it brings up so
Yeah.
much of, it brings up so much anger, so much grief, and there is a lot of the hurt involved in it. And especially as we go through and like we learn more things about our birth family and our siblings over there and how we might not ever get a chance to connect with them. Like it just depends on how things turn out. Like we don't know. And the fact that we could have had our whole lives together. Even over here as adoptees, we could have been in contact if things were done differently. If the agencies had a way to do this better and keep the family together, if there were
Mhm.
ways for, just more accountability and more transparency through the process, like there could have been a lot less secondary kind of trauma from the process. So while it has been overwhelmingly positive and really, really great for us, it's complicated, just like any other
Yes.
aspect. It's got full of ups and downs and all of those nuances that don't get talked about enough, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really important to share because it there is a lot of grief involved too, and it's like we want to be grateful for having these new connections, but we did miss out on a lot, and I feel like a lot of people are just like, oh, be the grateful adoptee, let it go, let it go, but it affects us, in our day to day. Like you can't help but wonder, like, what if I did grow up with my sister or my brother, and like, what now? What extra steps do I have to go through to kind of nurture these relationships that I don't know, I feel like in part like we shouldn't have had to fight so hard.
Right, right.
And so it's complex. And so thank you for sharing that with us.
I think I don't know. I think, Leigh, I so agree with what you were saying too. I think that like in everything, like thank goodness now we have each other too to lean on through this. But like there are some things that, that do pop up. Like if we get a response or we get that maybe we'll be able to find more information or maybe we'll hear something, it's trying to balance too, like expectation and, and hope. And I think it is that, that kind of I guess, or maybe bringing some feelings to the surface. There's a lot of, I think, self exploration that goes along with it, and you kind of have to be prepared for that too. And I think just kind of and also too, just with the more, with more social media and with more resources, and with more communities, and also knowing that you're not alone, and there is more than the gratitude narrative of, I was raised in a, a loving home, and I had a roof over my head. I mean, there's so much more to it, and that's okay, right? That it's okay to feel that way. But I do agree. There's that whole spectrum of really complicated layers, and but it's neat.
Yeah, and I found too that just being adopted, my sisters are all adopted. They were adopted into the same family, so it's just a little bit different than you guys' dynamic. But still, our perspectives on adoption have changed and evolved, and our reactions to it too. And I can see, like, one of my older sisters will be like really emotional and kind of not standoffish, but a little hesitant to be involved in like search for birth family in Colombia and stuff like that. And I think it's okay to realize that we're all at different stages, and just because we were all adopted and we're all related, it's okay for us not to agree on everything, and to kind of take things day by day too. And I feel like sometimes there can be a pressure to make sure that we're connecting and we're doing enough, but it's okay to also work on yourself and take the time that you need to digest things.
Yeah, exactly right. Everybody's on their own track, so it's important to keep that in mind. Definitely.
No, I think that's another good thing about our relationships here is that, I feel like I can just text or say anything that's on my mind. Doesn't matter what it is. Like, I don't even sometimes think twice about it. And I was like, if there's anybody else, I probably wouldn't have even sent that message. But the fact that I can send it to them and not worry about it, you're not worried about judgment or them thinking is like, well, you're just ridiculous. Or even if they do feel that way, they'll straight up tell me, and that's fine. And then, I'm glad that I have that sort of relationship with them, because, I'll be honest with you, I don't have that type of relationship with my, adopted family, which is nothing wrong with that. We just had a completely different dynamic growing up. And then, finding blood family, this far along in life, you don't have all the time to develop, relationships through, more milder paths and things. You kind of just like, it's like, I need to know now, like, do you like this? Do you not like this? What are your limits? Like, can I tell you some really outrageous joke and you not get upset at me? Things like that.
There are several outrageous jokes.
Have all like, I'm wondering how your families, your adopted families, have all like reacted to you guys finding siblings. Because my mother was very shocked and very kind of closed. She was like, I don't know about this, how can you trust it? She didn't really believe in like DNA testing too. But then my dad, he was like, you gotta visit them right away. Go, go, go. So I was like, okay, which one?
Right.
So I was curious.
That's right. Yeah, because everybody gets their own opinions on this, because they're it's not a story you hear very often. So everybody's like, oh my gosh, and they like throw their thoughts on you. So I know my adoptive family has been super supportive. They are just like gung ho about whatever, I choose to do. They're very good about like kind of letting me lead the pace of things without like dumping all their thoughts on me. But like there have been definitely like extended family and friends that are a little more opinionated, and I'm like, I have to remind myself like, okay, just don't even listen to it, because it gets to be too much. But I mean, for the most part, people are very very supportive and very positive about it. I get it so managing people's expectations though has been hard, because they're like, oh well, I get to meet them when they come out and visit, or like, let's all make a family vacation together. And I'm like, no, like, absolutely not. I need to pace this for myself first. Like, let me go through this process, and then maybe I'll be able to include you like down the line if I have that emotional capability to include you. But everybody just kind of expects to be like fully included and immersed in this whole experience, because to them it kind of just feels like probably like a movie or something, when there's a lot more to it.
And they get excited.
Right. Right. Yeah. So like my family's like, oh, let's just, I'll fly them to my house. I'm like, no, you can't do that. That's not how things work. Like, chill. But yeah, I mean, been good, a little too much on this end, but positive and supportive, definitely.
Yeah, I'd say my family. I mean, my family has never been very vocally, emotionally, or things like that. Just how they kind of grew up. But everyone's been supportive. They're happy for me about it. They haven't as been probably as involved as, let's say, Leigh or maybe Katie's family have been, which is fine. It's just like I said, how we are. But they've all been generally supportive.
Yeah.
But I do know that Katie and Lee's family is very supportive of it. It's funny because I messaged like with both of their mothers, and so like I have my own
Right.
conversations with them separate. So yeah, it's fun.
He's working very hard to become the favorite child of all of our
Absolutely.
Oh.
Absolutely. We're like, oh, he
Uh.
does it again. Yeah, I think, the same. I mean, my family was really, really supportive. I will say that, my mom too was pretty transparent with me. She did, and she still does sometimes have those insecurities where she, especially like being an only child, I think, my parents like eyes were just focused on me, and I'm, they're like one child. And so now having siblings, at first I think it brought up a lot of like questions for my mom too. And she's, shared with me some of her insecurities of now, like, does this mean that, you love me less? Or, does this make you, and she's asked me, did I do the wrong thing? She's shared that, she was recommended to, trying to think of the terminology, but more of like, almost like an assimilation, right? Into,
Yeah.
just like kind of just this like, white American culture. And by not letting me explore, my Korean heritage, she'll ask me like, have you longed for that? Is that something, did we mess up? And so I think it's also, it's something that, we're working through too, but it's also been really great because then these are conversations that I feel like I have longed for, like for a long time. That maybe we didn't really have the courage to talk about or to really like, be able to articulate those feelings. And so I just think that that's progress to me, and being able to see that. And now, like, of course, like my mom is like, oh, well, Scott asked me how my day went and he knows where I went shopping. And so, there's the like, or she knows what's going on with Leigh because she's like, well, did you see, Victoria won this tournament the other day? And I'm like, no, I'm so thankful that you like follow her very closely on Facebook because I wouldn't know that, So it's really cool. And then there is that other like layer too of, where we're exploring things that we haven't spoken about before.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that end too. I recently had a conversation with my mom. She's like, I wish I did do things differently. But like you said, back then, a lot of adoptive parents were told, welcome the baby into your life and, assimilate. Like that will make them feel loved and understood. And there wasn't as much education and research and just resources available back then. But I think it's important for like adoptive parents and even adoptees listening to hear that like it's okay that to wish things that had gone differently in your childhood, and it's okay to feel upset or grieve about it, but there is also a chance moving forward you can build these relationships with your adoptive parents and you can open up these topics that you haven't had before, and it creates an amazing opportunity where you can build and like have Scott message, you guys
Right.
and stuff like that. I remember it was so special when I was visiting my sisters, and my mom was like, "You have to send me pictures," and she's like, "Oh my God, you look like so and so," and it was just like these amazing moments that we now can have because a lot more people are open about speaking about adoption. It isn't as taboo and stressful to even like bring it up, saying that, oh, you have another sibling, this so and so, and it's more people to love, and it's a bigger family, and it comes with its own complexities and beauties as well.
Right, absolutely. Opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah. So I think Leigh mentioned that you had done a little bit of research about your birth family. Have you guys looked into it a little bit more, or are you guys waiting until the pandemic's over, whenever that may be?
Right. Who knows? 20 years down the line. Yeah. So what I had found out before finding out about Katie and Scott, we had been able to find our biological father, and I found out about our two siblings in Korea. They weren't able to locate our biological mother. So I wrote a letter. He wrote one back, and I continued writing, but I never heard back from him. So that just kind of went by the wayside for years and years until I'm meeting Scott and Katie, and then Scott did a search through his agency to see if they could find anything else. You want to talk about that, Scott?
So through Dylan, they had something going when I was looking that basically everything was paid for. So some anonymous donor. So I was like, why not try? Can't hurt, I guess. I filled it out, sent the information. Honestly didn't expect either to get an answer or to get one quickly, but honestly, we got one back probably within a couple months. They said that they had located our biological mother, and basically that she didn't want to have contact with any of us. In the information I had put that we had found each other through DNA, and she didn't even bring that up. And I guess the social worker, whoever was communicating with her, brought that up to her. I guess at that point, she then admitted that there were two other kids given up for adoption as well. But that, other than that, she wasn't going to give any more information. Didn't want us to try to reach out to the other children that are still in Korea. And basically just didn't want to hear from us again. So that was basically the end of that one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. It's very traumatic, just finding birth family. And when I found my birth mother, she didn't want anything to do with me. And I feel like there's a lot of shame involved, and she was really afraid of like what people would think of her. And it's unfortunately something that we have to deal with, because people just hearing like, oh, I have other sisters that were adopted, they're like, oh, well, what's wrong with your birth mother? Like, shouldn't she have done X, Y, and Z? And there's a lot of negative stigma with it. And so hopefully, the next few years, and that will change. And people's attitudes will change, and that maybe can influence more openness, but it's definitely another challenge that we have to go through.
Right. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's the second rejection, it is that because, you no matter what, and like, no matter how much about the circumstances, you still kind of have that little bit of hope in the back of your brain, like, oh, it's going to be, I'm going to be in reunion with them, and it's going to be beautiful, and we're going to share our stories. And, and a lot of the time, obviously, it doesn't go that way. And you're right, especially when you do decide to share these things with the people around you, the overwhelming majority of people do have some kind of a negative comment. They say, right, like, oh, I can't believe they would do that, and they're such terrible people, or whatever kind of negative connotation they have in their head about it is like, there must be something wrong with them, without the knowledge about how the culture is and how shameful and how stigmatized all of this is. And then they're like, well, why don't you just go over there and like hunt down your siblings? And then I have to explain, well, I don't want to break up a family and like ruin lives. You know what I mean? There's so much more to it that people just don't have knowledge about. So there's a lot of ignorance that comes out of their mouths. And then even in sharing information about when I share things with some of my friends about our birth parents, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm feeling really sad about this because our birth mother doesn't want contact. And they're like, oh, well, you found your sibling, so at least you've got that going on. So it's always like, it's like, oh, well, you got to feel good about it because you have this, without acknowledging like, all the grief that comes into play.
Leigh, don't you know we need to be grateful all the time, because
right, always. I'm so thankful for everything.
Make other people comfortable. Like these conversations, they make things awkward, and they don't want to think about that. They just want to hear the clickbait story where they can just share it with their friends and feel good about themselves.
Right, exactly. Only positive things. Adoption is love, and only love.
I'm glad that we all could have a good laugh over that. I wanted to
Right.
thank you all again because there's three of you. I usually ask people for a piece of advice or something they would want to share with adoptive parents, and then a piece of advice that they would share with other adoptees. So I want to make sure we have time to close out because we got all of us.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a good question. Well, I would say for adoptees, anybody that is even thinking about, either doing birth searches or DNA tests, because in some of those groups, I see lots of people posting, it's like, well, I don't know if I should do it because what if I find something out? And what if I disrupt somebody else's life?
Mhm.
I say, go ahead and do it because, this is your life. You shouldn't have to play backseat to your own story.
Mhm.
Uh, so I'd say if anybody that's thinking about doing it, or even if you have the slightest inkling, why not do it? There should be nothing holding you back.
I tend to agree with that line of thinking. So
So I guess since we're sticking on advice to adoptees, I guess mine would just be kind of, take it at your own pace. Don't worry about what other people say because there's going to be unending opinions from other people. Like move at whatever pace you're comfortable with. Do what is best for your own well-being, for your mental health, there's so much stuff that people don't understand and it's your experience. So make sure you are the one that makes the decisions. And how you want to go about things. There's no wrong way to do it, whatever works for you as an individual. Just do what's best for you. That's my advice. And find community. Seek out those resources if you can. Instagram, even if you have IG or TikTok, like literally like TikTok,
Twitter,
anywhere.
Facebook.
Seek it out. Yep.
Let's see. I think my advice for other adoptees, I would say probably, and also even adoptive parents, I think, ultimately, whether you decide or you're looking into adoption or you're starting to have these conversations or you're, an adoptee that's starting to embark on this journey or continuing to, embark on this journey, I think it all comes down to kind of adding to what Leigh said about, knowing where you're at, knowing what your comfort level is. Maybe being prepared. I used to say just in general, I tend to not ask questions that I don't want the worst answer to as like a self-protective thing. But I think really, it's like knowing your limits, knowing your boundaries, and then also being able to communicate those. Because I know, in our relationships, like I'm that definitely that older sibling that's like, I haven't scratched that surface yet, and I need a little more time. But I think it's been amazing because Leigh and Scott are still here and they still love me, and that also is something that's so fulfilling. That I really don't have words to express, how much that means, because I have been in that, I should be grateful and I should, I'm a people pleaser, and I want to do everything and everything all the time. But I think finally having that feeling of just that unconditional, like, you do you, like, we're still here and we still talk to you, we still text you, has just been amazing. So I think it's just it's honesty, it's transparency, and just communicating.
Yeah, it's really special to have.
Definitely. Okay. I guess so. Advice
Background.
I know. Emotional. I guess my advice, I guess, for adoptive parents would be listen to adult adoptees. There is no lack of information out there now. There's no excuse. Don't shy away from things that make you uncomfortable. Read Melissa's book because it is fantastic. But no, I mean, there's no shortage of really helpful information, and there are things that are going to come up that are going to be uncomfortable no matter what. And your child is going to think about certain things whether they come to you or not. So you want to create a safe place where they do feel comfortable talking to you about those things. So do as much work on yourself as you can beforehand, and then just, don't shy away from the stuff that's scary or big or tough. It's really important that you're there for your child, and listen to adult adoptees. That is my
very
advice.
important.
Bottom line.
No, that's very good. I was just going to say, yeah, for adopted parents, because, I had a couple year period where my relationship with my parents was very rocky. I kind of went through my whole identity crisis during, junior year in high school around that time. So a lot of rebellion, running away, lots of different things happening that obviously, I'm grateful for what I did have growing up, but there may come a time for anybody that, the adoptee, may have issues with being adopted, or, that they don't feel like they belong in the situation. And no matter how much love your child and, are grateful for them and do everything you can for them, just because those things happen doesn't mean, you did something wrong and you need to try to fix it. Just try to go with it, listen to what their feelings are. And, because, it could happen when you're a teenager. It could happen when we're, middle age. At any point in time, we may have those, feelings at different points in our life, and they're valid. People just need to be open that it's okay, and, just be as helpful as you can, even if that means not trying to do anything. So.
Perfect. Thank you, all three of you, Scott, Leigh, and Katie, for coming on and chatting with me today. I know how it can be a lot to share our stories and finding family and the challenges and the rewards of it. So I just want you to know that it is really special that you all sat down with me today, and I'm really grateful.
I'm so glad that you joined me today. And if you would like to hear more from Adoptee Thoughts, make sure to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you'd like to learn more about me, you can check out my website, adopteethoughts.com. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.